Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm Juliet Dryden, the Director and CEO of BISA. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Christine Wilson, who's the Director of Research and Insight at the British Council. But most importantly, Zoha Siddiqui from Queen's University Belfast, who was the winner of the 2025 New Voices in Cultural Relations Prize for her dissertation on motherhood-based advocacy for transitional justice in Northern Ireland. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us. I think we'll go straight into the questions. So, Christine, over to you.
Thanks, Juliet. Hi, Zoha. Good to see you again. So, could you tell us what is transitional justice and why is it such an important thing to discuss?
Of course. So, transitional justice is essentially the process by which states redress patterns of human rights abuses, usually after a period of mass violence like war or dictatorship. So, transitional justice policies could look like trials to investigate and prosecute serious human rights abuses, or, for example, truth and reconciliation commissions to clarify patterns of past violence. Transitional justice is important because it helps to fulfill victims' rights to truth and justice, and also because by addressing legacies of violence, states can reduce their risk of conflict recurrence and improve peace and security, especially for vulnerable groups such as women. And in addition to transitional justice, I'll just flag the importance of motherhood and maternal harm in transitional justice literature, because maternal harm is a discrete, sensitive, and uniquely gendered harm, which occurs when mother and child are intentionally separated through use of force. And this relationship between mother-child is particularly exploited and securitized during conflict. So transitional justice policies at their best will address patterns of maternal harm to address the full scope of conflict-related harm perpetrated against women.
And Zoha, what was the puzzle that motivated your research?
Sure. So basically, the puzzle was why motherhood-based advocacy for transitional justice was not as well organized or as mass of a movement in Northern Ireland as it was in other post-conflict states that I'd seen. So prior to my master's in Belfast, I had spent some time in Guatemala and in Argentina, where mothers of the disappeared were at the forefront of transitional justice advocacy. For decades, those women had demanded that the state investigate and prosecute conflict-related harms. And during my time in Argentina, especially, I came to revere the Madres de la Plaza de Mayo, which is the main organization of mothers of the disappeared there. Their iconography, particularly their headscarf, was everywhere, tattooed on my host mother's arm, spray painted on plazas, worn at marches by thousands. And so when I arrived in Belfast, I expected bereaved mothers to be synonymous with redressing conflict-related harms there. But I was surprised to find that no equivalent organization really existed. There were cases like Relatives for Justice, which highlighted maternal harm, and individual cases of mothers advocating for truth and justice, but not a mass movement like the type that I saw in Guatemala and Argentina, and that exists in other post-conflict states like Sri Lanka, Turkey, and Bosnia.
Okay, so what was your thesis then?
Sure. So I found that in Northern Ireland, victimhood identity is often constructed on the basis of ethno-nationalist rather than gender or motherhood identity. And I found that ethno-nationalist identity also structures women's participation in transitional justice advocacy, which ultimately prevented a sustained cross-community movement of mothers for truth and justice there. So specifically, I found that ethno-nationalist identity defines and divides women's attitudes towards transitional justice, whereas Catholic victim communities are more likely to support transitional justice. Protestant victim communities are more likely to perceive transitional justice as biased, and as advancing an untrue political narrative which minimizes the harms that they sustain during the conflict. And because of this, and relevant to motherhood-based advocacy, Protestant women might have felt disinclined from engaging in any type of transitional justice advocacy. And in fact, in my dissertation, I highlighted a couple cases where cross-community advocacy movements, where they rarely came together, Protestant women did feel sidelined to some degree and eventually left those movements.
What were the main findings on how political motherhood is presented during conflict and in Northern Ireland specifically?
Sure. So in Northern Ireland, I concluded that representations of women as mothers during the conflict were sometimes used to neutralize rather than advance a politics of transitional justice. So a key idea here, which is applicable to contexts beyond Northern Ireland, is that women's agency is really crucial in how they represent themselves as bereaved mothers. Because tropes of women as inherently maternal and nonviolent and moral are prevalent during conflict, and they can sometimes be strategically leveraged by women to articulate and generate sympathy and support for highly political demands like truth and justice. But the danger is also that those tropes can be used to emphasize women's victimization rather than their politics. And in Northern Ireland, I did find that media sometimes portrayed women's experiences of maternal harm as apolitical or domesticated experiences of loss and grief, rather than as a mobilizing force for transitional justice. So, for example, newspaper articles might have featured pictures of women overcome with emotion and bereft, which were not inaccurate, but decentered their political activism. But more surprisingly and interestingly, I've also found that in Northern Ireland, representations of political motherhood have also been co-opted by paramilitary groups, which use that representation of the bereaved mother not to mobilize support for transitional justice, but for armed struggle. So one of the murals that I analyzed was a Republican mural in Derry, in which the funeral of an IRA combatant is depicted. And a woman, ostensibly the combatant's mother, is weeping over the coffin, which is clad in a tricolor flag, as she clutches her son's IRA distinctive beret and gloves. And her mourning in this mural is not seen as a mobilizing force for transitional justice, but as a sacrifice for armed struggle. And so her political motherhood is used to construct victimhood on the basis of ethno-nationalist rather than her motherhood identity.
Well, Zoha, you're the winner of the New Voices in Cultural Relations Prize. Wondering what opportunities has the prize given you and what's coming next?
Sure. So I think more than anything, the prize has helped me share with others the importance of this topic and hopefully has highlighted the prevalence of conflict-related maternal harm. But also personally, I think the recognition of this work has really confirmed for me that this topic is important to the international studies community. And that's motivated me to continue researching this topic in Pakistan, where I currently live. And I've already seen these themes of maternal harm and motherhood-based advocacy come up in my work here. So hopefully in the next few months, I'll be able to put my research together and publish an additional article soon.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's so great, Zoha. Thank you so much. Just a few words about the prize. So this is a joint venture between the British Council and the British International Studies Association, and was set up with the aim of engaging and amplifying new thinking in international relations. The prize recognises and promotes the achievements of students taking master's programmes in IR in the UK. Our 2026 call will go out on the 6th of January. So please, if you are watching this, do consider applying. And with that, thank you so much, Zoha, for doing this interview and answering all those questions. Fascinating. And also thank you to Christine from the British Council for joining the interview. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.